Welcome to Musicians Roundtable. Today, I'm meeting with Andrea Dieci, Italian guitar virtuoso. And recently, Andrea has completed and released a recording of the complete solo works of Toru Takemitsu, the great 20th century Japanese composer. So let me begin and ask Andrea, how did you get involved and first discover the music of Takemitsu?
Hi, Jeffrey. Thanks for your invitation. It's great to be here again. I discovered Takemitsu when I was a boy. I was still studying guitar at the conservatory. And I remember I attended a concert by Manuel Barrueco, and he played the Folios, which, if I'm not wrong, at that time were his only pieces for solo guitar. And I immediately loved the style of this music. I was very interested in modern music at that time. And of course, I am still today. So I looked for the score, and they were so complex to read and to learn. At that time, I thought they were too difficult for me. But still, I was so impressed that I didn't forget about this composer. And a few years later, when I was studying in Basel at the Music Academy with Oscar Ghiglia, I got a compulsory piece to learn for one of the tests that we had to do in that kind of school for the examinations. And one of these pieces was All in Twilight by Takemitsu. I had 1 month to learn it, and then I had to perform in front of a panel of teachers. So I learned All in Twilight, and it immediately became one of my favorite pieces. And then I went back to the Folios and started learning them. After a few years, some other pieces by Takemitsu came out. And so little by little, I learned all of his music, except the songs, because for copyright restrictions, they were not available here in Italy till a few years ago. So I got them in 2002 from a Japanese friend who sent them to me. And at that time, I was ready to learn and play all the music by Takemitsu. And so in 2003, I did a recording of his complete music for solo guitar. I was not completely happy with that recording, especially for the technical quality of the recording that, in my opinion, was not good enough to express all the shades of the music. And so last year, I decided to do a new recording with brilliant classics and with the help of my sound engineer, person that I've worked with for years now. And so I hope this recording can express more in that sense. My feeling is that it does.
Absolutely. And so one of the things about the recording that is an added point of fascination and so forth is that you are playing a Hermann Hauser guitar from the 1930s that had, my understanding is that Segovia had owned it for a period of time. Could you just tell us a bit about the Hauser guitar?
Yes, this was a great opportunity for me because there is an collector of Hauser guitars. He's a friend of mine, and I went to visit him last year, and I asked if he could give me the Hauser guitar for this recording, and he accepted. So I could keep the Hauser for about 4 months to 4 months to complete the project. And it was an extraordinary experience because this guitar is simply the best guitar I ever played. The sound is very deep and at the same time very, very bright. It has a kind of bell-like ring in the trebles, and you just have to explore, and you find so many wonderful colors, from Ponticello to the buca, we say, which is the sound hole. It's an amazing instrument. And this friend of mine told me that this is one of the instruments that Hermann Hauser built for Segovia after the famous 1937 guitar that he has played for, I think, about 25 years or so. And Hauser was always trying to make a better guitar. And this guitar, which was made 2 years later than the famous one, stayed in Segovia's hands for about 10 years, which is something very special, because usually Segovia would keep the guitars for a little time and then give them to friends or students if he was not interested. But he kept this guitar. And inside the soundboard, there is a pencil inscription, or how do you say, it's a pencil writing by Hauser himself, saying that the guitar is dedicated to Monsieur Andrés Segovia Montevideo, which is where Segovia was living in 1939, South America and Uruguay.
That's an extraordinary history. And what I found remarkable about listening to the recording is that when I normally think of Hauser and associated with Segovia, I think of his repertoire, 19th century, 20th century romantic. But it seems to me to be a splendid match to the Takemitsu music, because Takemitsu's music has an extraordinarily deep palette of colors and nuance and power and subtlety and shading and light, all of those qualities that come through with great clarity and pleasure and so forth. I thought that we could just take a bit of a tour through the content of the CD, and I note that it's arranged chronologically in 5 sections, starting with Folios in 1974, going through In the Woods 1995. Following that are his arrangements of popular songs, including Beatles and other standards. So Andrea, the first section of your recording is the Folios 3 pieces from 1974. Can you give us a bit of introduction to Folios, and we'll go from there.
Yes, the Folios were written in 1974 for the Japanese virtuoso Kiyoshi Shomura. There are 3 short pieces which still have some aspects of the modernist style of Takemitsu, which was typical of his music of the 60s. I think in these pieces we can already see a search for tonality, which is clear, for instance, in the 3rd piece, where you have a quotation from Bach, Matthäus Passion. But still the tonality is not really there. We will find it in later pieces and in Takemitsu's later style. And the Folios are also, in my opinion, the most difficult pieces to perform by Takemitsu, because those are the first pieces he wrote, and you can see that it was not so expert on how to write for the guitar at that time. There are some quite hard chords with very, very big extensions for the left hand, which in a few spots I had to make simpler, because I just can't play them the way they're written. But I think most of ordinary people can't. You really need huge hands to play those. And there is just one other case for this, which is in the first piece in the woods, where there is a very big stretch, and some people use the thumb to play the low F sharp and to reach for the top C sharp, but I don't like the way it looks. It's too showy, in my opinion. So I just put an harmonic to make the C sharp sound one octave higher. So after the Folios, we have All in Twilight, which is a set of 4 pieces written for the great Julian Bream in 1987. And here we can see a big difference in style from the Folios. Takemitsu's music in the 80s becomes more melancholic and more tonal, more simple in a way. And these pieces reflect all these aspects. Then there is a short piece, a piece for guitar. This is the title. It was written for the Italian composer Silvano Bussotti on the occasion of his 60th birthday. It's a very short piece, just 1 minute long, but you have all the best ingredients of Takemitsu's music just concentrated in this minute of music. It's a splendid piece. Then Equinox is a piece which dates back to 1993. It's quite special because it makes use of strange tuning with the 6th and the 2nd string lowered by a semitone. So it has a very dark color, which comes from the tuning. It is one movement work based on a painting by Miro. And finally, In the Woods, which is the last piece he wrote in 1995 when he was already ill, and Takemitsu died before he could listen to the piece performed. It's made up of 3 pieces that can be played independently, but there are some themes that go through the 3 pieces, so I think the best is to play them as a set. And in the track list, I wanted to keep separate the original pieces from the transcriptions, which are 2 aspects of Takemitsu's music, which are equally important, but I didn't want to mix them, because the 12 songs were written in 1977, so a few years after the Folios and before all the rest of the solo output. Those are transcriptions from songs that come from all over the world, from Japan, Europe, America. There's also a very nice arrangement of the International, which is quite ironically, which is arranged as a jazz ballad, which is very different, of course, from the march-like style of the original music. And then there is a last song which was published later, The Last Waltz by Reed and Mason, which is very similar in style to the 12 songs, but it was written in 1983. And my feeling is that Takemitsu was a wonderful um, transcriber and arranger of songs. He was very fond of Western music, both classical and popular. And you can see these in his transcriptions, which keep in a way the flavor, the style of the original, but they are quite deeply reworked, and they are not just they don't just sound like the original. For instance, if you listen to Summertime, it's a blend of blues and Japanese music. At the beginning, you have some harmonics which are based on a pentatonic Japanese scale. And also there are some hints to Brazilian music. So there is a kind of sense of, I don't know the word in English, but something that keeps the world all together through the music. You know what I mean? This is the spirit of his transcriptions, I think.
Yes, I think that I completely agree with that. About a year ago, I did get the publication of the 12 songs, and they are they're challenging to play. They're by no means easy works, but everything about them has a tremendous originality in it. And you can hear, as you said, I also hear influence of, for example, I would not be surprised at all if you were familiar with the great American jazz guitarist Joe Pass, because there are passages that he must have really enjoyed, and he then resynthesized some of that approach to the guitar in what he did. But I think that both players and audiences would find all of these works, the 12 songs, and also the earlier, more abstract works like Folios and all in Twilight, for example, wonderful things to listen to study and explore. I found that if I just may say just for a moment, that I also discovered Folios in the middle to late 70s. And it completely, for me as a player, it completely transformed and expanded my understanding of the guitar itself. I had never seen any composer use and discover resources of the guitar that I didn't know existed. And to me, his works as a whole are a monumental, extraordinary contribution to the guitar, alongside of, for instance, Villalobos' works, his 12 etudes especially. But they, in a way, they are revolutionary and also do for the guitar what great composers do. His is, in a way, more extraordinary because apparently he was not a very experienced, knowledgeable guitarist, whereas Villalobos was.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And the thing that impresses me is that he managed to achieve all these with very little, if any, special effects, just natural tones and harmonics, and an extraordinary capability to mix them and to get to expand the palette of the guitar, which is always in his music deep, but at the same time iridescent, with high sounds coming from the harmonics. He really uses the guitar like a small orchestra, and this is not commonplace. It's really what he manages to achieve in his music with very simple means.
Absolutely. And I think I constantly have been thinking about his use of harmonics actually for decades now. And it always, his use of harmonics, I don't know, we haven't discussed this together, but they are not decorative moments per se.
No.
He looked at the fretboard, and we say life on the guitar stops at the 19th fret. But for him, the harmonics were a palette of tones and possibilities that extended way beyond that. And
Exactly.
absolutely fascinating to listen to his music and to see how the harmonics are interwoven with all the phrases and all the techniques. It's an absolute masterful and creative use that I had never seen anyone use before.
Yeah. Also, I think the harmonics were a mean to connect the music to the silence. You know, Takemitsu's idea was that music and sound and silence, to say better, sound and silence have the same importance. And most of his pieces start with a single tone, very delicate. And on the guitar, which better way to get this than an harmonic? And also the fade away effect that has his music that fades into silence. The best way to achieve this is to have some harmonics at the end. And also some, I would say, some trademarks of Takemitsu's music, Takemitsu's style. Some of them, like the raising arpeggio with very, very high notes, they can be achieved very effectively on the guitar by the use of artificial harmonics. He knew all of these, and he employed these techniques in a very, very clever way, always with the orchestral effect.
Absolutely. Well, Andrea, this has been great to have you introduce and discuss the Takemitsu as a composer and the content of his amazing works for solo guitar. I really want to thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to continuing what you're going to be doing with your other projects, but this one itself is the complete Takemitsu solo guitar works is a very special contribution, and I want to thank you for it and for joining us today.
Thanks, Jeffrey. It was a pleasure, and I'm really glad we had this chat about Takemitsu. It's a composer that I really love so much.
Absolutely. So thanks again. We'll talk later.
Thanks.